The boot was sliced open like a gutted fish. Silver duct tape wrapped around leather and plaster, holding together something that should never have been on a human foot. Blood had seeped through the gaps, mixing with motor oil and Florida sweat into a dark stain that told a story of obsession. This wasn't a costume. This wasn't a prop. This was the foot of a man about to drive 200 miles per hour for 12 straight hours. And it was completely, utterly destroyed. March 21st, 1970, Sebring International Raceway. The most brutal endurance race in America was about to begin. And somewhere in the pit lane, a maniac was strapping himself into a machine that would either make him a legend or kill him trying. But this wasn't just about racing. This was about proving that Hollywood pretty boys could bleed with the best of them. This was about a movie star so desperate to be taken seriously that he'd risk his life, his career, and his sanity, just to hear someone say he wasn't just an actor. His name was Steve McQueen, and today, he was about to learn that some people will never see you as anything more than what they want you to be. 2 weeks earlier, McQueen had been flying through the air on a motocross bike when everything went wrong. The landing shattered his left foot in 3 places. Doctors put it in a cast and told him to rest for 8 weeks. Racing was out of the question. Any sane person would have listened. Steve McQueen wasn't sane, not when it came to proving himself. He'd been planning the Sebring race for months. It wasn't about money. McQueen was making millions for movies like Bullet and the Thomas Crown Affair. It wasn't about fame. He was already one of the biggest stars in the world. It was about something deeper, something that ate at him every single day. McQueen was tired of being called just an actor who races cars. He was tired of real racers looking at him like he was playing dress-up. He was tired of being seen as a Hollywood toy boy who bought his way into their world. Sebring was going to be different. Sebring was going to be his statement. So when the doctors said his foot was broken, McQueen said, "Cut the boot open." When they said he couldn't possibly drive, he said, "Watch me." When his team said he was insane, he said, "Get the duct tape." The morning of the race, McQueen hobbled through the pits on crutches. His left foot was encased in plaster, shoved into a racing boot that had been sliced open with a razor blade. The whole thing was wrapped in industrial duct tape, creating a Frankenstein's monster of medical equipment and racing gear. Other drivers stared. Some laughed. Most shook their heads. This was exactly the kind of Hollywood nonsense they expected from a movie star. More show than substance, more ego than brains. But there was one man who wasn't laughing. One man who saw McQueen's stunt as something else entirely. Something insulting. His name was Mario Andretti, and he was about to teach the king of cool what real racing looked like. Mario Andretti was everything Steve McQueen wanted to be. Born to race, bred for speed. The kind of driver who could make a car dance at 200 miles per hour while eating a sandwich. He was the reigning Indianapolis 500 champion. He was Formula One royalty. He was, without question, one of the greatest drivers who had ever lived. And he was furious for weeks. The media had been obsessing over McQueen's entry in the race. Sports Illustrated wanted to put the actor on the cover. Television crews were following him around like he was the main attraction. Meanwhile, Mario Andretti, the actual racing legend, was being treated like a supporting character in McQueen's movie. They want to see the movie star play racer, Andretti muttered to his crew. Fine, I'll show them what a real racer looks like. Andretti was driving the Ferrari 512S, a massive red beast that weighed twice as much as McQueen's little Porsche 908, but could hit speeds that would make your teeth rattle. This wasn't just a car, it was a statement. It was Andretti's way of saying that when the games were over, real drivers would still be standing. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. 3 hours before the race, Andretti's primary Ferrari blew its engine during practice. The crew scrambled to prepare a backup car, but it wasn't the monster he'd planned to drive. It was smaller, older, less powerful. For a moment, Andretti worried that his advantage was gone. Then he saw McQueen struggling to get into his Porsche, wincing with every movement, his face gray with pain. "That's not a racer," Andretti said to himself. "That's a crippled actor playing dress-up." The green flag dropped at 11 a.m. sharp. 25 cars screamed away from the starting line, but all eyes were on two machines. The small white Porsche with Solar Productions painted on the side, driven by a limping movie star with more guts than sense, and the red Ferrari, piloted by a racing god with something to prove. For the first hour, it looked like McQueen's gamble might actually pay off. Despite the agony shooting up his leg every time he pressed the clutch, he was keeping pace with cars driven by professional racers. His co-driver, Peter Revson, was handling the longer stints. But when McQueen was behind the wheel, the little Porsche flew. Andretti watched from his Ferrari, seething. The media attention was still focused on the Hollywood story. Cameras followed McQueen's every move. Announcers talked about his incredible courage and his determination to prove himself. "Prove himself," Andretti spat. "He's proving he's an idiot." But as the hours wore on, something strange began to happen. McQueen wasn't just surviving the race. He was competing, really competing. Every time he climbed out of the Porsche, his face was a mask of pain, but his lap times were consistently in the top 5. This wasn't a publicity stunt anymore. This was real. By hour 6, McQueen's boot was a horror show. The duct tape had started to peel away from the constant pressure and heat. Blood and sweat had created a dark, sticky mess inside the leather. Every shift of the gear lever sent lightning bolts of pain up his leg. At every pit stop, he popped painkillers and wrapped fresh tape around the boot. His crew begged him to quit. His wife begged him to quit. His own body was begging him to quit. But McQueen looked at the scoreboard and saw something that made all the pain worthwhile. He was in second place, behind only Mario Andretti. "I'm not quitting," he said through gritted teeth. "Not today." Hour 8, Hour 9, Hour 10. The Florida sun was brutal, turning the cockpits into ovens. Drivers were dropping out from heat exhaustion, mechanical failures, crashes. But the white Porsche kept circulating, lap after lap, driven by a man who refused to acknowledge that his body was shutting down. Andretti was still leading, but barely. The gap between him and McQueen was shrinking with every hour. What had started as Andretti's mission to embarrass a Hollywood pretender had turned into a real race, a war of attrition between two men who refused to lose. As the sun began to set over Sebring, something happened that nobody expected. Andretti's Ferrari started to stumble. It wasn't a catastrophic failure, just a small loss of power, a tiny hesitation in the engine that meant the difference between leading and following. In the pit lane, Andretti's crew worked frantically to diagnose the problem, but time was running out. When Andretti climbed back into the car for the final stint, he was no longer in first place. The white Porsche had taken the lead. Steve McQueen, the Hollywood actor with the shattered foot and the duct tape boot, was leading the 12 Hours of Sebring. The final hour of the race was fought in darkness. Headlights carved through the Florida night as exhausted drivers pushed their machines to the absolute limit. In the Porsche, McQueen was barely conscious. The painkillers had worn off hours ago, and every bump in the track sent shockwaves through his broken bones. But he was leading. After 12 hours of hell, after proving every doubter wrong, after showing the racing world that he was more than just a pretty face with a fast car, Steve McQueen was about to win the biggest race of his life. That's when he saw the headlights in his mirror. Mario Andretti had found another gear. Whatever was wrong with his Ferrari, He'd found a way around it. He was coming. And he was coming fast. For 30 minutes, the two men played a deadly game of cat and mouse through the darkness. McQueen held the line, using every trick he'd learned, every ounce of skill he possessed. But Andretti was relentless. This wasn't just about winning a race anymore. This was about proving that talent trumps celebrity, that real always beats pretend. With 15 minutes left in the race, Andretti made his move. He came up on McQueen's outside going into turn 1. The two cars were side by side, neither giving an inch. For a moment, it looked like they might both crash, taking each other out in a blaze of twisted metal and wounded pride. But at the last second, McQueen's body betrayed him. A wave of pain shot through his foot as he tried to brake, and his line faltered just enough. Andretti swept past. The race was over. 23 seconds. That's all that separated Steve McQueen from victory. After 12 hours of torture, after pushing his body past every reasonable limit, after proving that he belonged on the same track as the greatest drivers in the world, he lost by 23 seconds. In the pits. McQueen sat in his car for a long moment after crossing the finish line. The duct tape around his boot had completely fallen apart. Blood had soaked through the leather. His hands were shaking from exhaustion and pain. And something else. Something that felt like failure. When he finally climbed out of the Porsche, he needed help to stand. The crowd cheered for his effort, his courage, his incredible second-place finish. But McQueen wasn't listening to the cheers. He was watching Mario Andretti celebrate his victory 50 feet away. Champagne spraying, cameras flashing, surrounded by the respect and recognition that McQueen had sacrificed everything to earn. Later, a reporter asked Andretti about racing against the Hollywood star. Andretti's response was polite but pointed. He drove well for an actor, Andretti said. But at the end of the day, racing is about more than just wanting it. It's about having it in your blood. Steve McQueen never spoke publicly about losing that race. He went back to making movies, back to being the king of cool, back to the world that had made him famous and rich and beloved by millions. But those who knew him said something changed after Sebring. The obsession with proving himself to the racing world faded. Maybe it was because he'd pushed himself as far as any human being could go and still come up short. Maybe it was because he realized that some people would never see him as anything more than what they expected him to be. Or maybe it was because, in losing that race by 23 seconds, Steve McQueen had actually won something more valuable. He'd proven to himself that he wasn't just an actor playing a part. He was a man willing to bleed for what he believed in, even if the world never gave him credit for it. The boot from that race still exists today. Cracked leather and faded duct tape, a monument to obsession, and the price we pay when we need the world to see us as more than what we are. Sometimes the greatest victories come disguised as defeat. And sometimes proving yourself means accepting that the only opinion that truly matters is your own. Have you ever pushed yourself to the breaking point, trying to prove something to people who were never going to change their minds about you anyway?